At this time, I will ask because I need to on these counts. Before I impose any sentence, Mr. Daybell, you do have the right of allocution, which permits you to make a statement on your own behalf in any mitigation of these offenses. Is there any statement you would like to make before I proceed with sentencing on those counts?
No.
Very well.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. While I must apologize that my channel wasn't covering the ultimate sentencing, the death penalty of Chad Daybell. I'm sure many of you watched it. Certainly when I was watching, there were about 21,000 watching. But I think the fact that Chad Daybell didn't testify, number one, and number two, there was no allocution from him. He didn't say anything after receiving the death penalty. You could actually hear a tremor in his voice where he said, he was asked, is there anything you want to add? And he said no. You could sort of hear how loaded his voice was with emotion and with
Which permits you to make
the
a statement
gravitas
on your
of the
own
moment
behalf
as well.
in any mitigation to make before I proceed with sentencing on those counts.
I think it was Vinnie Politan who said from CrimeCon in an interview with Nate Eaton, he said he was really surprised that Chad, someone who's a speaker, he's spoken in front of audiences before, a writer, someone who's made speeches, someone who's written and made pronouncements for other people, hasn't made one or couldn't make one for himself. And I think that really shows Chad's hypocrisy and also his cowardice. You can only wonder or speculate what's going on in his mind when he was sitting there. A man with no agency, a man who's indigent, a man who made a mess of several families, a man who basically just made a mess, a very small man in a large man's body. In the Jennifer Dulos case, the aspect that I think was really missing and one I meant to bring up and failed to bring up when I covered that was the horror show that was the divorce, 300 motions, as wonderful a person that Jennifer was, that was the background to that case. That was the scripture. That was the doctrine playing out in the background. In this case, the doctrine was something else. And I think it's also been given a pass in this case. And, when we talk about being authentic, we've got to go into certain areas that we otherwise wouldn't. Sometimes we feel we shouldn't. And sometimes we feel we can't. I feel like that is part of a kind of moral and cultural justice, even if it's not necessarily part of the legal narrative. That is what sort of being authentic is all about. And in this case, it is these extreme beliefs that are sort of a driving force. It's this place where magical thinking arises. And I think many of you are going to be unhappy with what I'm about to say, and I'm unhappy saying it. Obviously, it seems like now should be a time for, I'm not sure what, celebration. I certainly do feel relief like the rest of you. I certainly feel sadness like the rest of you. I certainly feel a sense of closure that at last this horrible case is over. But I was watching the press conference. I was watching people congratulating themselves, and some of it is warranted. People did have to work hard. There was some stellar police work that was done here. But something that definitely irked me, and although I have tremendous compassion and sympathy for the Woodcocks, this case actually isn't over. There is the next chapter, Charles Vallow's murder. But the part that definitely I found concerning was somebody singing a song in front of the cohort of press. And some of the words of that song is, all good things must come to an end. There's nothing good about this thing. Unless you want to stretch it so far as to say that getting the death penalty in a death penalty case is a good thing. It's arguably the right thing, and some would argue it's not even that. I don't know if it's a good thing. It's good that things have been dealt with, certainly, but I don't think it's appropriate to be singing a song. I don't want to belabor the point. I mean, I have compassion and sympathy for the Woodcocks, and I've seen them in person myself. So this is certainly not to do any of that, finger pointing. But, there's a sense of the press and the victims sort of having a party. And the reality is sobering. The reality is this reality, a kind of a holocaust of dead people. And if there'd been a sober appreciation right in the beginning, when Charles Vallow was saying to people, my wife is crazy, my wife is saying this, right in the beginning, if he was believed instead of whatever took place, this was months and weeks and months before JJ and Tylee died, and Tammy. So if there had been critical thinking right at the beginning, when Charles Vallow approached the police, he warned them. He warned them, and then he died. Tammy also warned people on social media, and then she died. So I think it's just something to think about, and I think there is a conversation left to have on this case. It's a conversation I'm having, and you guys can look out for that. I know it's not going to be a popular conversation, but it's a conversation about the beliefs on which Chad built his church, and the beliefs that many of us have built our lives. And we need to think very carefully about those. That's the lesson from this case. Anyway, I'm not going to take it further than that. As I say, I'm sorry I wasn't around to do this when it was happening. But there it is. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.